All right. Welcome everyone to the Stoa. Uh, this is a continuation of the Entity Pill series. And we have a real treat today. We have Lama Tsultrim Allione joining us. Uh, Lama Tsultrim is the founder of the Tara Mandala International Buddhist Community and Retreat Center. It's dedicated to carrying on the teachings of an 11th century woman Buddhist teacher, Machig Lobdrön, uh, of whom Lama Tsultrim has actually been formally recognized as an emanation. She's been doing really cool work for a long time, highlighting women of wisdom throughout history and empowering women in leadership through her work, through Tara Mandala. You can go to taramandala.org to read more about Lama Tsultrim's biography. It's very cool and really worth taking in. Lama Tsultrim's also the author of a book, Feeding Your Demons, Ancient Wisdom for Resolving Inner Conflict. So feeding your demons is the topic of our session today on the entity pill. So we're going to learn a bit more about that. Lama Tsultrim, hello. It's really an honor to welcome you here to the Stoa. Thanks so much for your time and for joining us today.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So, yeah, I know that feeding your demons has a really rich history and lineage behind it, with which you're profoundly connected. Yeah, perhaps you could maybe just share a little bit about that background to the practice to begin.
Yeah. So there was a woman who lived from 1045 to 1055 to 1145. Her name was Machig Lobdrön, and she taught a practice that was quite dissimilar from most of the practices from Tibet, in that in this practice you would offer your body as food to that which would assail you, rather than protecting. There's a lot of practices for protection or for averting negativity, but her practice of offering or feeding rather than fighting is quite unique. And during the practice, you undergo your own death. It's shamanic in that sense, of course, not actually, symbolically. And then your body is offered. So this came out of an event in her life where she was receiving empowerment from her teacher in a monastery called Janang in central Tibet. And as the blessings of the empowerment were descending into her body, she rose up from her seat and began to dance. This is the story. And she was dancing about a foot off the ground. And then she went through the wall of the monastery and flew up into a tree. And this tree was the property of a very negative water spirit that the local people were so afraid of, they didn't even look at the tree or this pond that was below it, where the water spirit dwelled. And so the water spirit, this Naga, that's the name for water spirits, came to attack her in the tree because she was in his territory. And she just stayed in meditation and offered her body. And so that really upset him because everyone was afraid of him and she wasn't. So he went and got all his fellow Nagas, and they all manifested a huge army, and they all came at her all at once. She was 20 years old. She was up in this tree, and she just looked at them and again offered her body. And they were so impressed with her fearlessness, that they then offered themselves as her allies and said they would protect her and her followers and all the following generations. And so feeding her demons really is based on that idea. And in contrast to the Western typical idea, and of course, not only Western, also in Asia, there's many stories like this of when the demon attacks, the hero gets all their weapons and destroys the demon. There's a big fight, right? That's the typical myth. For example, the myth of Hercules and the Hydra in Italy, where he has these 12 labors, and one of them is to destroy this Hydra in southern Italy, which is nine.
Oh, it seems like Lama Tsultrim's dropped off there.
Back.
Wonderful. Welcome back, Lama Tsultrim.
So anyway, just to finish that story of the Hydra. Sorry, so something happened with my connection. So when he went there, the Hydra approached him and attacked him, and he cut off the heads of the Hydra. It had 9 heads. But every time he'd cut one off, 2 more would appear. You know the story, right? And so that's really our situation. Like if you look at terrorism, you know, we kill one and 9 more appear. So that is a contrast to this approach, her approach of feeding, not fighting. And so that's the basic idea of feeding your demons.
Wonderful. That was a really beautiful amplification of the Herculean mythos there. And yeah, that's such a cool story about Macha Globdron and that bold kind of offering of herself. And what strikes me as you share that is, you know, it seems like when we engage in feeding your demons, we're kind of participating in a recapitulation of Macha Globdron's act. So yeah, maybe a great place to kind of just pick that up is maybe just to speak a little bit about how that recapitulation unfolds through the practice and what engaging and feeding your demons practice kind of looks like for someone who takes it up.
Yeah. So the way it came about, the way this method came about was that I teach a traditional Tibetan practice called Chut. And in that practice, which comes from Machi Glabdran, you offer your body. And so I was teaching it in the West, and I was thinking, how can I make this real for people or relevant for people in the West? Because you sing in Tibetan, there's a drum and a bell, and it could very easily become a kind of foreign ornament that people put on rather than a genuine, deep personal practice. And so I evolved the 5 steps of feeding your demons in that context of teaching the traditional practice. And then I had a lot of students who were psychotherapists, and they started using this little kind of teaching method that I developed with their clients. And they would come back to me and say, that's all they want. They just ask every time, can we do the demon work? And so then I realized, oh, this has its own life. This has its own, life outside of just teaching the Chut practice. And so I developed it and over 20 years, and then wrote the book in 2008. The book came out and then spread. It's in 28 different languages now, which is also interesting that this idea of feeding, not fighting seems to be relevant in Korea and all kinds of places, China and Mongolia, that you wouldn't think of, Bulgaria and so on, that it doesn't seem to matter what the person's cultural background is, that the 5 steps help people. And so that's how it's evolved. And then there's several scientific studies that have been done on it now for anxiety depression, and addiction, and it's shown to be effective in all of those quite remarkably.
Beautiful. Yeah, it seems like clearly there's a way that people are very hungry to feed their demons. Culture.
But we
This
definitely have a lot of demons, and I think more and more as the whole world situation literally heats up, and I don't know, it just feels like things just feel more dangerous all the time. Do you have that feeling?
sure.
Yeah. So we need a way to work with all the emotions that come up around our current situation. And this method is really quite amazing in that you can be in a pretty bad state and do the demon work and come out 20 minutes, half hour later, not only okay, but feeling empowered and deeply from your core strengthened by it.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And maybe I'll just kind of pose one more question before we open it up to the audience to draw some questions. So again, yeah, if anyone has something they're curious about, please toss it in the chat here. But this approach, it does seem to be resonant with other approaches. I'm thinking about internal family systems work, which is really gaining a lot of popularity. This idea that that within us that we would most want to excise or just get rid of or do away with actually just needs love, like
Yeah.
actually just needs to be encountered with love, and that is like the alchemical act that leads toward wholesomeness and actually helps remove obscurations, I guess. Now, to give a little bit of context of this series, we have Robert Falconer in the audience. I saw who was a guest on this earlier. He's the author of The Others Within Us, and just this whole notion of demons. It's, you talked about kind of making it relevant for contemporary Westerners, and I think when we see these things as manifestations of parts of our own psyche, that makes more sense to a contemporary Western audience generally. And yet, what seems to be one thing that seems to be coming through the aperture of IFS right now, amongst other things, is maybe this uh, flowing back in of kind of engaging with what might be a little bit more of traditional ideas of understanding what demons are or what they might be, how they fit into the cosmology that we're in and our place within it. Leads me to be a little bit curious about what the understandings of demons were, say, in the 11th century when Maciek Lobdon was developing Chud, and I guess how those notions sit with you in tension with contemporary views on these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Maciek Lopton said all demons come from our mind, and they should be met with love and compassion. There's actually a quote from her that says exactly that. And so whenever people ask me, yeah, but what about the real demons? Are there real demons, or are there really negative forces kind of that are separate from your own mind that can attack you? And I always quote Maciek and say, all demons come from your mind. Because I think it's a very slippery slope to get into like real demons and exorcism and all that sort of thing. Because really, they do all come from your mind. Everything comes from your mind. So, yeah, but it's interesting that you bring up IFS because I know Dick Schwartz and we have talked quite a bit. And in one of my Lama Lives, which is a live program webcast that I do, and also a podcast, we did it together where he led me in IFS and I led him in Feeding Your Demons. And yeah, there's a lot of similarities. What is different, perhaps, in Feeding Your Demons is there are some Buddhist elements in it that you wouldn't know if you weren't aware of what Buddhism is, but there's a few Buddhist elements in it, and you only work with one at a time. In IFS, you can kind of move, now this one's appearing or that one, and so there's some differences, and the principle is the same, which is there's parts of your psyche that are trying to get your attention. And if they don't get it in a positive way, they're going to get it in a negative way. They're going to bother you with an addiction or with a phobia or whatever until you pay attention. And I thought about that word, pay attention, that you actually pay with your attention. In other words, you give something with your attention. That's kind of the beginning of the gift. And that approach to the parts of ourselves that we don't like, would rather not have around, etc., is really quite revolutionary in terms of many systems. And it is also, I'm aware of Dick's work. I'm not aware of this other person who you mentioned, who's here today. And I think it's wonderful that there's lots of people doing this type of work because we need it. And our culture is really operating on a very different paradigm. And so that's why I see it in our collective responses to political situations, international situations, etc. That this model of fighting, not feeding, it doesn't work, and that we need to start talking to our enemies.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm getting the multiple levels and resonances as you say that. And maybe before we reach the bottom of the hour and open up to questions, as you were just speaking, Lama, there was a moment. I actually went and spent just one day with you in the audience at Spirit Rock last year. And when you say all things come from your mind, I just get a sense of the depth of what you're actually pointing to there, get a sense of it. And I think you were teaching on sahaja that day. And you were speaking of these multiple obscurations, like these things that we could frame as demons, and you even actually remember you mentioned, if you're being assailed by paranoid thoughts or like suffering under kind of paranoia, and you said something profound. You said, and this is very Vajrayana to me, who's the one paranoid here? Ask who it is to whom this is happening. And you said something like, and that liberates it. And that liberates it. So if I remember correctly, and I hope I'm kind of capturing the essence of it well there, I'd love to hear a little bit about just that move, that asking, to whom is this occurring, and then that kind of liberating effect that has.
Yeah, well, there is something called direct liberation, which is different than feeding your demons. Direct liberation is turning toward, let's say it's a demon. Let's say you have depression. You're having that feeling in your body of like, I don't want to get up. I don't want it. I can't face it. That kind of compression, feeling of depression. And so if you turn your mind toward that, directly toward what, maybe we can do this with everyone in the audience. We could just try it together, and rather than me talking about it. So let's everybody take a moment and feel into something that is bothering you right now. Maybe it's a worry. Maybe it's a relationship issue. Maybe it's some kind of fear. Whatever it is, just take a moment and feel it. Feel the sensation of it in your body. And now look at who is feeling that. And maybe people could write into the chat what they experience when I ask that question. Or maybe you can say what yours is, and then other people can say, what did you experience?
Well, yeah, please everyone populate the chat with what was coming up. I haven't found it yet. I haven't found the one yet. Who's
Right.
experiencing it?
Yeah. So in that not finding, what did you experience?
Uh, a kind of, I guess, a spaciousness.
Yes.
Um, yeah, not
Yes.
there's not a sense of boundedness in which this is happening. It's what comes up.
Yes. Yes. So so you liberated it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if you can just rest in that not finding, and it's wonderful that you like genuinely like were looking and genuinely didn't find, you didn't like, oh, I know the answer here, you know, like you had the experience of not finding. And in that very moment of turning and looking and not finding a thing there, that's the experience of emptiness. And that's the true condition of reality. And yet there's cognizance, there's awareness. So your experience is you're experiencing emptiness. That's sort of like you turn, look, and it's you don't find anything. You can't pin anything on it. And yet there's openness, there's spaciousness, and there's awareness. So that is liberation.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And one thing I just want to name is reading over the responses here in the chat. I'm just seeing the contrast between emptiness and form. It's like the emptiness is being presenced. For some people, it's the form being presenced, which is just beautiful to see. And one thing I'll just share personally is like in my own experience of doing that kind of practice, the more I've done it, the more that emptiness starts to avail itself more readily. So, and it's the act of looking. It's the act of actually doing the search. So that's just beautiful for that to come in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's something that you can do at any moment. It's called instant liberation.
Mm.
However, if you have a big thing, like maybe you've got a big fear, or you've got somebody has just died, you have grief, you have whatever, something that's much stronger than normal, then it's very difficult to do this because almost as soon as you liberate it, it's back. And so you have that load again. And that's when feeding your demons comes in handy, because with very difficult, heavy things, the process of the 5 steps takes you to that liberation, but it goes much deeper and somehow is more effective for more sticky things that have more of an impact on you. I mean, you can develop this method of turning, looking, and liberating so that it becomes a habit, which is what you were saying, where you train in it. And it's very different than mindfulness, because mindfulness is requiring the continual coming back to the present moment, or the breath, or whatever the object of the meditation is. Whereas with this, there isn't effort, actually. It's effortless. And so you're experiencing non-duality effortlessly. And that is your true condition. That's actually your true condition. The true condition of existence is non-duality. And because it's already present, it's effortless. It's not something you have to create or do or generate. It's already there. And so that's why it can be so instantaneous.
Well, that feels, thank you for that. This feels like a good moment to we turn it over to the audience. And before I do that, I just want to say you mentioned quickly the 5 steps of the practice, and I know that these are on the Tara Mandala website. I'll throw those in the chat there if folks want to read more about that portion of it. And is Lama Tsultrim still with us? Did Lama Tsultrim drop off again?
No, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. There you are. Okay, sorry, I didn't see you in the spread there. Great. So yeah, I'll just start pulling in some questions that have populated the chat. And Kevin, curious if you'd like to unmute and ask your question yourself, or if you want me to read it.
Oh, yeah, I can ask. Hi, Lama. How does one how does one get to a point where she or he can offer themselves to such powerful forces with confidence that they won't be destroyed?
You won't be destroyed. It's not a matter of, you have to kind of build up your feeding your demons muscles, and then you can take on the big guys. Because this is your own mind. And in the feeding your demons, in the second step, you become the demon. And so even if it's really scary, by step 2, you are it. So who's being scared at that point? If it's something which could be really psychologically triggering for you, I'm thinking about people who have trauma, or, for example, sexual abuse history or something like that. What I suggest is that you work with a psychotherapist who's trained in feeding your demons and certified in it, which we have on our website, a list of them all over the world. So I don't suggest that you would do it with one of those if you feel kind of like, ooh, I think I need some support here. But in general, if it's not something like that, it's just like, let's say it's fear of World War III or something like that. That's big. Then don't worry about, I need to build up my feeding your demons muscles before I meet this one, because as I said, you're going to become it. You're going to find out what's underneath that fear, and you're going to feed it. And then it's going to transform into an ally. So by step 5, you have your ally. Does that answer your question?
Maybe. Let me ask a quick follow-up. What if it's a force that, say, wants you to take your own life?
Oh, like that, I would definitely work with a psychotherapist. And they might determine it's not a good idea to do this, or they might, but I would put it in the hands of a professional. and, get that guidance and support. Thank you for opening that up, because that is an important point. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And Bob, it looks like your question got some thumbs up there. Would like to look me to unmute and ask.
Okay. I'm a big admirer of yours, so it's great to hear you talk. My question is, do you distinguish between demons and benevolent beings? If so, how? And if so, do you treat them differently?
Mm. Well, by the way, I love your library.
It's digital.
Oh, it is? Okay. I was like, I want to come to your house. So the demons are things that block our freedom. That's the meaning of the word Mara, the Mara that attacked the Buddha. And so we also have what's called Tla, which are gods. Gods are the other side of the coin from demons. So there are hopes or obsessions. So what we really want or what we're obsessed about are not really different than what we're afraid of and trying to get away from. It still has that tension in it of wanting or not wanting. It's a tension in the psyche. And so you can feed the gods as well as the demons. So let's say you really want love in your life, or to be in a relationship or something like that, then you can work with that as same way that you would a demon. That's different than just sort of a general benevolent presence or compassion or something like that. That's different. You wouldn't work with that. But if it's a sort of positive thing, but it has a lot of tension in it for you, then that's a good thing to work with. So the Tibetan word is ladre, god demons, and often they're tied together. So we have a fear, let's say fear of being stuck in samsara forever, and we have a want for nirvana, a desire for nirvana. Those are hopes and fears. And so you could work with either of those or both with the 5 steps. And it's interesting how something can start out as a god and then become a demon, like an addiction. In the beginning of an addiction, it's a love affair. It's like, wow, this is actually going to solve my problem. I'm not whatever anymore. I'm like, oh, I can relax. I feel safe, or whatever. I feel powerful. There's always that good part of an addiction. And then there's a longing for it. Oh, I want to get more of that. Oh, it didn't quite take me there this time. I need more. And then it gradually shifts into being a demon. And then you find, with addiction, people committing all kinds of crimes and acts that they would never do normally. And so the god has become a demon.
If I may ask a follow-up question, perhaps I'm misunderstanding, but I've read a fair amount about deity yoga. And I
Yeah.
believe that people are visualizing the deity in great detail and calling it down to inhabit them. What do you make of that practice?
Yeah. That's a very different practice, and very powerful practice. It's called the fruitional vehicle, Vajrayana, because you're acting as if you are in the fruitional state. In other words, you're acting as if you are Tara. or you are Avalokiteshvara. And by actually visualizing your body as that, with all that detail that you mentioned, and you know the symbolic meaning of whatever they're holding in their hands and however they're seated or standing and what all that means, you have all that symbolic input into your psyche. And so that then, and the mantra, which is sound. So you have the visualization and the sound and the embodiment. When you do mudras, you know, the hand movements that are done as part of it. So you have body, speech, and mind. And so that's the path of transformation. That's the base of Vajrayana practice.
Thank you.
And that's different from the path of natural liberation or inherent liberation or self-liberation, which is what I was showing in that first exercise that we did of turning, looking, and not finding, an effortless presence. That's Dzogchen or Mahamudra. That's not the path of transformation. That's the path of natural liberation. And really quite different in how you do it. And yet they both are powerful paths and tools for waking up.
Well, let's see, Shayla, you've had your hand up. Let's see what you're holding there.
It's good to be here with you, Lama Tsultrim.
Hi.
I have a deep love of that practice that you've brought into the world. And I hope I can say this clearly, but when I heard you speak about how, all demons are in the mind,
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's an expression of the view, that is at the foundational to Dzogchen and Vajrayana. And I resonate profoundly with that. And your next statement, in which you said it's a very slippery slope if we start asking if the demons are real, which I also, but if I'm not mistaken, and Peter, you can correct me, but I have a feeling that that slippery slope is part of what we are exploring here. And so in my work with, for example, with Dick Schwartz, I like the beings that he is working with, he calls them unattached burdens, and my understanding is that they are not quite the same as disowned parts of ourselves. It's relating to them as having a very different kind of existence than the disowned parts of ourselves. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I talked to him about that actually. And that's a more recent discovery, or sort of, as I understood it from my conversation with him, that he's sort of like, oh, I think there are actually these other things, that have more sort of realness.
Yeah.
And so that's his choice to believe that, or and work with them as that. This is not what Machi Lapton said. And so that's why I stick with what she said. Also because being a Buddhist and understanding that really all of this is our own mind. There's a wonderful Dzogchen word or concept called rangnang. Rang, it means innate or inherent or self. And then nang means appearances. And so the idea is that what we perceive as our reality is our rangnam. it's our inherent, the appearances that are inherently present because of us. So you're experiencing right now your Rangnam. I'm experiencing mine. There is no objective reality from that
That's
point
right.
of view.
Yeah.
So I mean, Tibetans are really into demons. Like,
Yes.
there's a lot of practices of dealing with them in different ways and making offerings to them, chopping them up. Practices, where the arms and everything have like these knife wheels that, I mean, very fighting them as actual entities, to the point where some early explorers who went to Tibet said, this is demonology. That's what their religion in Tibet is. There was this guy called Waddell, who was an early, I guess you could call him, scholar, who went to Tibet and, said that, not understanding the deeper understanding below these other things. But I just think that for practical purposes, in terms of our own lives, I mean, maybe what Dick is doing is beneficial. I'm not saying it's not, but it's not what I choose to do.
It's very beautiful to feel that clarity in you, and to also just kind of feel that Machid, in that moment in that tree, there was no sense in her that that water spirit was a separate objective entity that could, it feels to me like this is a really important piece of what we're exploring here.
Yeah.
And in the shamanic worlds that I've spent a fair bit of time in, I've noticed how easily the objectification of these forces it just creates a lot of fear.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting to hear that, because I haven't really been in worlds or situations where people are believing in. But I know, just from schizophrenia, or the more psychological issues of belief in that, and experiencing that because of the fragmentation of the psyche. It's it is a slippery slope, and it's much better, more effective to deal with them as projections of your own mind.
Thank you very much. And thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. Thank you.
Amazing question, Shayla. So we have some other awesome inquiries, and I just want to check in with you real quick, Lama Tsultrim. Do you have a hard stop at the top of the hour? Is there a little bit of spaciousness to spill over a tad bit if that happens?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, fantastic. Skylar, you had a thread of inquiry that really interested me, and I'd want to tug on that if you're feeling called.
Sure. Yeah, I was just sitting here. Well, first of all, I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm a big fan of your work, Lama Tsultrim, and have read your books, and have done the Feeding Your Demons practice a bunch myself. Like, it's really been helpful to me. I've done it for or on behalf of family members. I don't know if that's, I mean, that's kind of one small question I have. Like, can it be done for someone else? And I like the question that I posted in the chat was about imagination and the use of imagination. And in my experience reading Feeding Your Demons, like, so many of the examples you give are so vivid. Like, I learned so much from hearing the case studies. And then in my own experience, that inspired me to really, and I'm a Vajrayana practitioner, and so I exercise the imagination and really know the power of it. But sometimes when I'm working with people, it's like a lot of Westerners, it's an atrophied kind of process, or they don't believe it's real. So it's like in leading them through the steps, it's hard for people to imagine, I think, with much detail. So I was just sitting here I think in the field with you, like feeling the vividness of the Tibetan, yeah, the richness of imagery. And at the beginning, when you told the Machig Labdrung's story, it brought me to tears, because I was right there with you. And I guess it's a question. I guess I just wanted to hear you speak about the power of imagination, the use of imagination in so many of these subtle body or subtle world practices. And yeah, it would just feel really good, I think, and inspiring to hear you on that.
Yeah, I'm glad you're using the word imagination, because a lot of people get put off by the word visualization, and they think they can't do it. Like, I can't do it. I can't visualize. And then I say, well, can you imagine? If I say, imagine an apple right now, can you imagine it? And pretty much they say yes. And I was like, well, then you can visualize. And they're like, oh, they just have an idea that it's something more than imagination. So if we think about that idea that the world is our projection, our rangnang, then imagination is really creating our own rangnang. In other words, taking that fact that we are creating our own reality and then working with it. For example, visualizing yourself as Tara. For example, you're taking this thing that you're already doing, which is projecting an idea of yourself into the world, and you're transforming that into a luminous force of compassion with a different color than what you are now, and without intestines and liver and so on, just made of light. And so that process is very powerful. Since we are imagining our own reality, then we're beginning to create this reality of the Sambhogakaya, the dimension of luminosity, and bringing that into this solidified form of the elements. So we're literally illuminating our bodies and our minds with the imagination, using it, because usually we don't consciously use it. We might, oh, I was imagining this or that, or maybe we make up a story if we're a writer, novels or whatever. We use imagination, but do we use imagination for transformation? Understanding the impact of imagining something, of holding a vision in our minds and stabilizing that vision, that actually has an impact physically on the body of elements and also on the mind. So I want to answer your other question about, can you do this for others? Generally not. Generally, I don't encourage that. I would encourage you, I would encourage them to do it for themselves, and you could guide them in that. But I wouldn't figure out by myself what I think their demon is and, feed it. That isn't what I teach. I'm not saying it couldn't be done. It's just, I really stick with this idea that we work with ourselves and we can help others to work with themselves. But it's their demon, and it's going to be much more powerful for them if they do the work and they see it. And I think probably you're in situations where maybe they don't want to or couldn't do it for some reason. Is that right? Why you would do it for them? Yeah. So yeah, then yeah, I would just try to get them to do it. Yeah. It's nice to meet you. And I like the mandala behind you. Is that 3D or?
It is in a sense, right? It's Borobudur.
It's my Rangnam.
Sweet.
So, kind of interesting follow-up to that might be helpful for some folks coming from Jonathan, just about a fantasia, actually. Jonathan, do you want to ask that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you for this session. So my question is, like, I have aphantasia, which is inability to generate mental imagery. Like it's just black with some hints of red, my back of my eyelids. And I'm curious, like, how could I go about doing this practice? Is it like possible to get into the embodied feeling of being the demon somehow, or like, do you have any experience here?
Yeah. So if I say, imagine an apple, you can't,
No,
you don't see anything.
no, like I have tried this multiple times.
Yeah.
It's like just nothing.
Yes.
So if I'm to imagine an apple, I think of like biting into an apple, like the sensation of like crunching through the skin, but no image.
Yeah. Yes. So that would be a way that you could do it, exactly what you said, of like you'd start with, if I say, feel it in your body, could you do that? Not see it, but just feel it.
Yeah, like sense of being somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't actually worked with anybody in that way. I'm not sure how well it would work. But Dick told me that he had that when he was going to work with me. I was like, oh, great. Now you're telling me. He said he couldn't visualize. But somehow he managed to do it when I led him through it. And I said to him after, Dick, you visualized. And he was like, I did. I thought I couldn't. So, I mean, he used that word that you used. What is it called? Wait.
Aphantasia.
Yeah, he said he had that. Which is interesting considering his work. Do you know his work of the parts, IFS, internal family systems? Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah. So I wouldn't know really until I tried to do it with somebody who has what you have, if it would work. I'm not sure. It may be that it's not the right thing for you because you have this, that there's maybe other methods that can be more effective than this, and there might be a way to do it. So I'm not sure.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, awesome. So it seems like a lot of the questions we've had have been touched on to some extent. However, I do get a sense, just for one more, Peter, your question, it seems like it might go a little bit deeper in directions that we've gone and hopefully bring some help to where, bring some assistance precisely to where it's needed. So if you want to ask that one.
Thank you, Sam, for doing a wonderful job hosting this session. And thank you, Lama, for coming to visit us at the Stoa. It's been a nourishing time with you. And so this series, as Shayla mentioned, we're discussing demons and entities from various different perspectives. And there's like a cohort here that are skeptical, and there's another cohort who have a more psychological understanding. It's like from the mind. And then there's people who are treating it as ontologically real, like these are real entities outside of us.
Mhm.
Each one has its own sort of agency that it affords. And so with that context, I'm wondering, in the taxonomy of demons that you provided in the book, the inner demons, the outer demons, the demons of the ego, which ones are the most tricky? Which ones are the most resistant to this approach, or other approaches that you've seen?
I think the third demons, the demons of elation, are the trickiest. So I'll just go over them for the audience. Like, what are the four kinds that Machik delineated? There's outer demons, which would be something that you perceive with the senses. Let's say a bear attacking you, or something that's actually physically perceived. The second one is inner, and that's things that arise within the mind, like, say, depression that doesn't come from an outer event happening. It just arises, or paranoia, or something like that. And then the third one is demons of elation. And the fourth is demons of ego clinging, which is at the root of all of them. So the demons of elation have to do with good things happening. Like, let's say you have a good dream, spiritual dream, and then you kind of grasp onto that and you think, wow, I had this really amazing dream. I think maybe I'm actually almost enlightened. And then the ego starts to get inflated around these good things. And that could be also in a more worldly sense of fame. Fame is considered to be a demon of elation, like, oh, I'm actually really important. So there's that feeling of inflation. And what Machi said is the demons of elation are the hardest to recognize, because they're like good things that happen, or experiences that happen. There's a story in the sort of history of Tantra where there's somebody who's going into retreat, and he's a very promising young yogi. The whole village has faith in him and is really looking forward to his enlightenment and serving the village in the future and so on. So they're all supporting his retreat and going to bring him food and so on. And the night before he starts, he has a dream in which the deity that he's going to be practicing in the retreat comes to him and says, I'm going to bring you something important for your enlightenment tomorrow. Someone important. And he wakes up and he's really excited because his deity told him this. And so that day, the villagers come to make offerings, and they bring him food and they bring him all kinds of things for his retreat. And then at the end of the line, there's this beautiful woman who comes and offers him the white scarf. And then he thinks, this is it. It's her. This is, she's just offering this scarf and she's coming to me like this. And so he approaches her and he asks her if she would come and practice with him. And anyway, they get completely involved, and he stops doing his meditation sessions. and the villagers lose faith in him. And he's just living, in this retreat hut with this woman. And he loses everything that he had. And he's not keeping his session, so he's not practicing. And he recognizes this is the demon of elation. And before that began, at the beginning of the story, the four demons were meeting. This is how it's described, that the demon, the outer, the inner, the elation, and the demon of ego clinging. And they see he's about to get enlightened. How are they going to stop him from getting enlightened? Because that's their job. And so anyway, they each go, how well I should do it, the outer one and the inner one, well, I should do it for this reason. And then the demon of elation kind of wins. And he's like, I'm the one that can really do it. And so he ends up being the one that could do it.
That's fascinating. Fascinating story. And for a quick follow-up, I wonder if power would fall under that demon, the demon of elation. I'm reading a lot about power and how it corrupts and how it's very seductive. And unlike like a substance that you can just like materialize, it's very nebulous. And a lot of traditions talk about how demons are attracted to the powerful or sociopathic individuals. So if I wonder if you have any thoughts about power and these demons.
Yeah, power would fit into that because it's like a positive thing, right? You power, like, wow, I can make decisions that guide all these people, or we see it in our politics. It's very attractive and people do not want to let go of it. And it's inflated. It causes inflation. And, like, well, actually, I'm the king of the world, or I'm, whatever. And so that would fall into the category of the four demons, the three main ones, and then the demon of ego clinging that's under them all. And so I think what's important really is that demon that's under them all. The demon of ego clinging that arises from the rupture, from the ground of being. When our consciousness splits from the ground of being and goes into dualistic fixation as reality, that's where all the demons arise. And so that's the fundamental demon, the demon of ego clinging. Because once we have that experience of the split, there's anxiety that arises that causes the formation of the ego. So, yeah, that's called duxin, self-clinging. And I think, what I would like to leave you all with is remember the real problem. And remember that there is a real solution. And don't get caught in the complexities of the problem and make that your life. Make your life the return to the ground of being, the effortless presence of it, because that's where we find freedom.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lama Tsultrim, just for graciously offering your time and wisdom into this space and for everything you've unfolded within yourself to make this possible. Yeah, and maybe just as a kind of one final piece, if folks are interested in pursuing this thread further with feeding your demons, are there any places you might point them to investigate?
Yeah, there are. In fact, right now, like September 7th, there's a course starting, a level 1 Feeding Your Demons course that can lead to certification. And you can also just do level 1 and level 2 and not certification. And so that's on our website, and perhaps you can find the link. I don't know if you send links to people, but I can send you the link if people are interested in that. And it's really important, if you really want to learn feeding your demons, to do something like that. I mean, you can do it from the book, but there's so many different kinds of scenarios that can come up. And there's so many different kinds of guidance that you can get for that with this training. So encourage people who are interested to do it. And if you're a therapist, to get certified in it. because it really is quite incredible how well it works. You know, people are always saying it works, and it's like, yes, it does work. And it's a method that I really thought through for 20 years and worked with for 20 years before writing the book and sort of really finalizing what the 5 steps are.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lama Tsultrim. It's been a joy having you here and an honor just to engage in this way. Yeah. And one last note I'll just add here, because I'm a Berkeley resident, a student of Lama Tsultrim, Chandra Easton, teaches weekly at the Alembic in Berkeley, and those live stream every week. It's at 7 p.m. Pacific, so that might be late for some folks. And quarterly, she offers Feeding Your Demons as well. And this is somebody who knows the practice very well, holds it well, and is in this lineage that leads back to Mache Globdran and ultimately to Tara as well. So yeah, I also wanted to name that as something people can check out, the Berkeley Alembic. Check out their YouTube channel. More into it. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Peter, thank you. And Chandra's actually a lineage holder. And so I definitely encourage everybody to meet her in person if you can. And I also come up to Berkeley occasionally. There's no plans right now for me to teach there, but it may evolve next year. We'll see. And thank you for having me. It sounds very interesting what this group is exploring. And the questions were so good and so representative of people really having a deep practice themselves. And yeah, it was very interesting group of people that you're working with. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lama. Wonderful having you. So, and thanks everyone for showing up. Thank you, Peter, for opening your space here for all of us. Yeah, this is wonderful. So with this, we'll tie it off. So go very well. And yeah, Lama, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.